At the beginning of the film, we see Kenny, a basketball player who is aided in matches by the ghost of his late brother Antoine. The worst part is that Antoine not only meddles in Kenny's basketball life but also in his personal life and doesn't even let him date girls. From here the scene shifts to many years ago with two brothers, Antoine Tyler and Kenny Tyler, competing in an inter-school basketball game. They are the heart and soul of their team, earning them the moniker A and K all the way as their tagline. Their coach is none other than James Tyler, their father. James chooses Kenny for the final shot, which makes Antoine feel really bad because he is older and a better player than Kenny. However, when Kenny approaches the hoop and prepares to shoot, he loses confidence and passes the ball to Antoine, confident that he will not miss the basket. But things do not go as planned, as Antoine misses the basket, resulting in the loss of the game. Both of them are devastated by their defeat, but their father assures them that the fight is not over and that they still have a long way to go together. The scene then shifts to several years later, when both boys have grown into teenagers and are still standout players on their basketball team, particularly Antoine. They are the most prominent athletes on their university's team, the Huskies. In basketball, both of the brothers are unstoppable and can dominate games and take them for their team. In the evening, the Huskies squad goes out to celebrate their victory. Despite being surrounded by attractive girls, they are all chatting about basketball, demonstrating how obsessed they are with the game. Meanwhile, Kenny sees RC, a news reporter, and falls in love with her at first sight. He walks over to her to talk, but she walks away before he can reach her. The next day, Antoine jumps for a basketball shot during a basketball game. Although he succeeds with his shot, he unexpectedly suffers a heart attack and goes unconscious. He is quickly taken to the hospital, and the match continues as usual. In the absence of their finest player, the Huskies lose the game and return to the changing room disappointed. They change their clothes in preparation for a visit to Antoine in the hospital. Meanwhile, they are approached by their coach, Peterson, who informs them that Antoine has died as a result of a serious heart attack. Hearing this, Kenny bursts into tears because his father died of a heart attack a few years ago, and now his elder brother. Kenny receives consolation from his teammates and coach, but this loss cannot be made up. When Kenny returns to university after his brother's death, he is approached repeatedly by different news reporters who want to cover this news, which makes him angry since instead of consoling him, they are approaching him for their own benefit. Then RC approaches him. He assumes that she is also here to report on that news, but when she notices Kenny in anguish, she consoles him and offers him a shoulder to cry on, cheering up his heart. In the evening, while playing basketball, Kenny fails to coordinate with his team, which causes him to become irritated and lose his temper. Peterson calms him down by telling him that he must regain control of himself and that he has to lead the team from the front like Antoine wants. He continues by saying that if they want to win their upcoming game against one of their fiercest rivals, Kenny must play like Antoine. These remarks strike a chord with Kenny, who then chooses to put Antoine out of his mind and prepare himself for the next match. The next day is arch-rivals battle day, and the match between the Huskies and New Yorkers begins, with the New Yorkers taking an early lead. However, just when everyone thinks the Huskies aren't going to win from here on out, things start to change, and the Huskies unexpectedly get back into the game. While the Huskies are outperforming the New Yorkers, Kenny can occasionally hear his deceased brother Antoine calling out to him from nearby. He is perplexed by what is happening, but he ignores it and concentrates on the game. In the end, Kenny makes a seemingly impossible shot to stun the crowd and win the game. Everyone celebrates the triumph and returns to the changing room with pleasure. When everyone had left the changing room except Kenny, he began to hear Antoine's voice. Now he is afraid of where his voice is coming from and follows the direction of the sound. To his surprise, Antoine's afterlife comes in front of him out of nowhere. He is both shocked and terrified and rushes out of the dressing room, but is stopped by Antoine, who calms him down by saying he is his brother and is here to help him. Antoine adds that he was the one responsible for their victory as well as the reason Kenny hit an unbelievable shot and was named player of the match. Kenny relaxes and is relieved to see his brother again. Antoine informs him that he is here because he wants his team to win the national championship and that he will return following that victory. The next day, when Peterson is explaining to the Huskies how they can win the game, everyone is paying attention except Kenny, who is constantly behaving strangely. Antoine is actually teasing him by making him giggle instead of concentrating on the coach. Following this, the match begins, and the Huskies quickly become victorious thanks to Antoine's ghost's assistance. Kenny is overjoyed as a result of their triumph and embraces his brother in the locker room. Only he can see Antoine, while the others can just see him clutching the air or acting abnormally. His coach and teammates assume he is acting in this way out of grief over losing his brother and permit him to continue with what he is doing. After a few days, Kenny spots his crush, RC, sitting by the fountain and approaches her. He begins to have some wonderful conversations with her, but before he can keep going, Antoine shows up and begins annoying him. Seeing this, Kenny goes away after offering RC dinner with him, to which she graciously agrees. Antoine does not stop here but continues to bother Kenny while jogging, practicing, and almost everywhere. When Kenny is practicing with his teammates in the evening, Antoine shows up and begins ridiculing Kenny. He makes him do strange movements, sloppy walks, and other things. Kenny's teammates believe he is suffering from some sort of illness, which is why he is acting so strangely. Seeing this, Kenny discloses to them that Antoine's ghost is forcing him to do this. Hearing this, his teammates become increasingly convinced that he is not mentally stable. Kenny begs Antoine to do something to make them aware of his presence. Antoine initially does nothing, but after being repeatedly requested, he performs certain spooky actions, leading his teammates to believe he is with them. The following day is another crucial match for the Huskies to advance to the next level of the national championship. The match begins, and the Huskies comfortably win yet another game thanks to Antoine's assistance. Everyone is surprised that the Huskies are doing so well despite the absence of their star player. RC's colleague reporter is skeptical of the Huskies' stellar achievements in the past and recommends she investigate the cause. He adds that if she is successful in exposing the Huskies, she will achieve great notoriety. To achieve her aim, RC goes on a date with Kenny, but after repeatedly interrogating him about the reason for their exceptional performance, she learns nothing. As usual, Antoine shows up to destroy his brother's date and constantly disturbs him. Even as Kenny and RC were about to share their first kiss, he placed his hand between their lips, and instead of having a passionate kiss, they both kissed his hand. The next morning, while watching a video of the Huskies' most recent match, RC realizes that they are being guided to victory by a supernatural power. She watches the clip several times before concluding that something unusual is going on with the Huskies team. She makes notes on her investigation and decides to expose the Huskies. In the meantime, the Huskies team arrives in Kenny's room and requests that he stop Antoine from interfering in their matches. They continue by saying they want to keep the game fair and win games on their own. Hearing this, Antoine loses his cool and wreaks mayhem in the room, claiming that they are all here because of him. After calming down, he tells Kenny that it is his dream to see the Huskies win the national championship and that he is here to assist them in doing so. Kenny promises him that they will win the championship and tells his teammates to concentrate on their game rather than be distracted by Antoine's presence. Then, on the basketball court, Kenny runs into RC, and this time he tells her that the reason for their successes is Antoine's afterlife. He goes on to say that he is assisting them throughout the tournament and will not leave until they become champions. Having said that, Kenny leaves, and RC rips the notes she had prepared to reveal the Huskies in an effort to hide the reality that a spirit is helping them. The semi-final will be played between the Huskies and their arch-rivals, the New Yorkers. The game starts, and this time, Antoine decides to sit out the game, but the Huskies are certain to lose as a result. Seeing this, Antoine comes in and whips away the most famous player on the New Yorker and a close friend of Kenny's named Jared with his superhuman force. As a result, he sustains severe injuries and is taken to the hospital. The New Yorker falls badly to the Huskies in the absence of their top player. After the contest, Kenny rushes to see Jared in the hospital and tells RC how much Antoine is interfering in his life. She soothes him and instructs him to talk to Antoine about staying away from him and letting them win the championship on their own. Kenny enters the dressing room to await the arrival of Antoine. When Antoine appears, he informs him that his team no longer requires him. Kenny adds that he used to be a good player, but he is now a ghost and his intervention in the game is unjust. Antoine makes several attempts to persuade Kenny to let him play with them. He goes on to say that they can even win an international championship because of him, but Kenny and the rest of the team refuse to let him, which enrages him, and he walks away in fury. Finally, the day of the National Basketball Championship Finals approaches. Before their game, Peterson tells the Huskies that he wishes to see them win at any cost because he lost the national championship when he was their age decades ago. He continues by saying that losing at this stage is the worst kind of defeat and that he is still heartbroken over it. After hearing this, the lads feel that winning this game is essential because it will ultimately calm their coach. The game begins, and the Huskies are quickly outperformed by their opponent's squad. They are unable to make even one good shot without Antoine. During the halftime break, some Huskies players ask Kenny to call Antoine because only he can win the game from here. Seeing his team members' disappointment, Kenny stands up to deliver a motivational message, adding that Antoine is always with them in their hearts. He goes on to say that Antoine would never want them to be like that and that if they play to their full potential, they can win the game from here. In the end, Kenny states that if Antoine were still alive today, they could win this game, implying that if they play like Antoine, they can still win. These remarks provide a lot of motivation to his squad, and they decide to give it their all and try to win the game in Antoine's absence. The game resumes, and miraculously, the Huskies come back and manage to tie the score in the second half. Kenny then runs for the final shot and launches the ball in the final 3 seconds. Antoine arrives out of nowhere to ensure that the ball goes to the hoop, but Kenny begs him not to meddle. However, the ball goes straight into the basket, and the Huskies win the national championship. Everyone begins to applaud, and the spectators invade the playing field to cheer on the Huskies. After viewing the Huskies as champions, Antoine walks away to vanish but is approached by Kenny, and they have a brief conversation. Before vanishing, the older brother encourages his little brother not to be fearful of anything and guarantees him that he is always with him in his heart. Unexpectedly, Peterson saw the brothers chatting and asks Kenny if he was Antoine, to which Kenny answered yes, he was Antoine, their sixth man, and here is where the movie ends.
I hope you enjoyed the recap. If so, then give this video a thumbs up. And yes, if you want to be the first to know about my new videos, hit the subscribe button right now. It may seem worthless to you, but it is a huge motivator for me to keep going. I'll see you in my next video. Have fun and keep watching the Movie Explainer.